Welcome to Honest Talk about heartbreak, dating, and relationships. The podcast helping you navigate your path to happy ever after with your host, Rob McPhillips from RelationshipGPSProject.com.
So the question is, how are people like us, who didn't grow up being taught how to have an authentic relationship or have any great relationship role models, who are facing the usual challenges and stresses of work and life, how do we get over breakups, get into authentic relationships, and maintain love and connection with all of the challenges of the modern world without losing our identity or sanity? That is the question, and my quest is to give you the answers. Maybe from childhood, did you have great relationship role models?
Great relationship role models. Wow. So funny. I think about so many things in my life, and I hadn't thought of it as that perspective, but actually, yes. I mean, my parents, they were married for 46 years when my mother passed away, and they were married their whole life, but their marriage wasn't always easy. It wasn't a household of angst. I believe that I had one of those childhoods where people would like to look at it and say, wow, that's a normal American childhood. When in fact we find out, nobody really knows what normal is. But I grew up in a house where people generally were kind with each other and they got along. But as adults, we do still laugh at the times that we fought and made fun of each other and hurt each other as kids, so we did that too. And my parents did have a time when things weren't as easy, and we were aware of that. So I knew that they worked through things. I mean, I could see that. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, I did. And some of my friends' marriage, I wasn't around a lot of divorce. I remember when my next door neighbor's family got a divorce. That was kind of shocking to me. This was in America in the 70s when there wasn't as much divorce, and I was learning about it. So I would say I grew up in a healthy family situation. Yes, it had troubles, and yes, it had laughter and blessings. So yeah, it was a good example.
And so where did you and your husband meet?
How we met, and you can let me know if you want to get into this story or not, but it's actually, both of us came to live in Nashville. I'm from Nashville, Tennessee, actually Franklin, Tennessee, south of Nashville. And in my family, I was a firstborn child, and my mom had some vision problems. And so when I went to school and went away, I was ready to stay away for a while. I'd been, active a lot in my community and in my family, and I was just enjoying being on my own. But I literally felt like I had a supernatural guide from God that said, come back to me, come back to Nashville. I want you to come back and live in Nashville. And my husband also, he's from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and he had a similar, his experience wasn't similar, but it was similarly supernatural in how he arrived in Nashville. Just an amazing experience, how he wanted a new direction and met somebody, and how it all came together was just so amazing. And so we both ended up in Nashville at the same time. And when I got back to Nashville, I was already impatient to leave. And but I met him shortly thereafter, met him about 2 months after I got home. Well, the month after I got home. And we actually were wed 10 months after we met. So within a year of my coming home, I was married. And then, when I felt like God told me to come back to Nashville, he had actually said to me, you're going to be there between 18 to 24 months. And we actually left the area, having been married for about a year, at 21 months. And so there were so many things at the beginning that just made me feel like it was right, and we were the right people for each other. And it really gave us a good foundation when things did get more difficult. We could look back to that and say, there's a reason we're together. Too many things came together at the right time to just toss everything or be cavalier. And our faith was instrumental. When we got married, we were very much about being committed. We didn't use divorce as part of our language. It wasn't an option. We always believed there was a way to work through it. And my husband's family, his parents are still married, and they've been married for over 60 years. Oh. Yes, 60. And so we've had that, he also had that example, but that was our start, was we're going to stay married. We were committed from the beginning, and that was it. We were committed.
So you obviously have a background of faith.
Yes.
And you both have kind of parents that were together in the long term. It was like you didn't have a get out, so you had to work things out, whatever problems or challenges you'd face.
Right.
If you were to look back at the you that were when you got married, what were the things that you wish you knew then that you know now?
One of the most important things that we learned, it was about 5 to 7 years into our marriage that we learned. I mean, I'm going to say it now, the thing that saved our marriage. I mean, at that point we were already like, oh my gosh, we're so different. Is this going to work? You know, and it was so hard. I'm not going to lie. It was so hard. And we actually did the DISC profile. The DISC profile. It's a personality profile that has started in business and is broadly used now. And we found out who we really are, our personalities. And we used to say we found out how we're hardwired. That can become an excuse later on. We can talk about that some more if you want. But we found out how we were personality-wise. This is who I am. And even as I grow in self-awareness, this is still going to be who I am. And so we learned who I am and who he is. And then we could just kind of sit back in a chair and go, oh, all right, well, a few more things make sense now. And we could look at each other and the way we behaved and the way we interacted and things that agitated us about each other. We at least understood, you're not doing that just to make me mad. You do that realistically. And you come by it honestly. Okay, well, good. Let's start from here now. It kind of gave us a new leveling up. And so right now, when I teach a lot of the classes that I teach, and even when I talk to young people, I'm very much, let's find out your personality profile in one, whether people like the DISC or Myers-Briggs or the Enneagram. My son did a different one even at his office. So whatever it is, those tools help people understand things about themselves that can help them be more at peace with who they are. And when they're more at peace with who they are, then they can get along better with others, I think.
Yeah, definitely. So what were the biggest challenges? You said it was about 5 to 7 years in. And what would you say were the challenges that cropped up then?
We were in an environment, we were self-employed, and we were trying to work together. And he was doing things his way, and I was doing things my way. And that worked okay before we had kids. You know, he could kind of do his own track, and I could do my own track. But then we had a child. Raising our kids was just a huge value for us. And we had a lot of romantic ideas about what that would be like, as I think many people do. And for us personally, and I think there's some lesson here for a lot of people in the culture, in the Western culture of the world right now too, was I wanted to stay home with our kids, and I wanted to actually homeschool them and spend time with them and laugh with them and be with them. My personality is such a doer and in charge kind of person. My poor kids, I'm still trying to tell them what to do, but they talk back to me really well now. You know, we've talked through all that. You know, what is it like to have mom help me do things? And so I have this large personality that wanted to be doing things and wanted to be leading. And so I was investing all that in my kids, which was fine. But then I was having less of a place in the community. And I had an expectation that my husband, who is an artist and a creative and a contemplative, I had this expectation that he was going to take on all these leadership roles and do all these things that I wanted to do because now I'm going to be at home. I was shifting my expectation of who I am and what I wanted in life, that he should be doing that. And that's not who he is. We had to figure out, again, who are we? What's the best place for us? And there's a big thing, and this is so true right now, in roles. What are people's roles? And, you know, I was going to be the stay-at-home mom, and he was working and had a business. He was a graphic designer at that time. We had our roles. We weren't completely settled in them, but we had our roles, and it was okay. And who's going to do the cleaning, and who's going to do the cooking, which, by the way, I did it for a while. That didn't last very long. It's about finding out what you're good at and what you're enjoying and taking the roles. And so when we found out that I have this large personality and I like being in charge of stuff, and he's more introverted and doesn't want to be out with all the people all the time, well, then we began to work much better as a team. And we looked for what are the needs that I have and what are the needs that you have. And, so that led to us with our family. I mentioned that I had wanted to homeschool our kids, and I did, in fact, homeschool them for a few years. But I also found out then that, we had some learning challenges, and I just went kind of like, I can't do this, and I waved my hands and bonked the chandelier. We had fireworks in the dining room, and boom, the next day, put the kids in school. It was a very dramatic moment. But it led us on this path of, okay, well, gosh, now is that the best thing for our kids? Well, but wait, what's the best thing for mom? If mom can't do this, then it's not going to be best for the kids. If mom's stressed out with the kids, it's not going to be good for the, Mark's in my relationship. And we began walking down a path of what's good for our whole family. Our whole family unit, everybody has needs in the family. We want everybody to have the best path for them in life. So let's start taking a look at, okay, Mark's in my relationship first. How are we as individuals? How's our relationship together? Then is our time then looking at the kids once our relationship is strong. If our relationship is strong, our kids are going to be happy pretty much anywhere, whether we live in our house or our RV or they're homeschooled or public school or private school or whatever. If the parents' relationship is strong, the kids are going to feel safe in that. And they didn't. They went to various schools over the course of their school career, some private, some public. And our main question always was, what's best for us as a family? What does mom need at this time? What does dad need at this time? What do the kids need at this time? And how does that affect the whole relationship? So, we had chosen this one private school for our kids, and what was best for our family was to move closer to the school because we spent too much driving, and that was too much of a stress factor. That's just one example. Once you decide, then you have the spokes that go out. But it's very much a team. The four of us are a unit. We're a team. And how can we all find a win together?
That's something that was quite a shock to me. Where I read something years ago about, I'd always thought, as a parent, your children come first. And it was quite a shock when I read this thing and someone said, no, it's your spouse that comes first. Because without that bond, then you don't have that base. You don't have the base of the family, and then it's going to be kids playing off against each other. And it's counterintuitive to me, but it's actually you have to have that bond first as a couple before you can have that bond as a family, and before you're able to, that's the base.
I'd agree with that. That was something people told me too, and we had. When we were going through all that with our marriage and trying to understand each other, everybody was encouraging us. Yes, you're focusing on your marriage. That's good. You've got to do that. And it lasts your whole life, because now here we are, empty nest, been married 30, almost coming up in a week on 31 years. And our kids are empty nest. We still enjoy talking to each other. We still enjoy each other's company. Enjoy. I can honestly say we enjoy that. He's the one I love spending time with, but it didn't come without work.
Yeah. See, I think people have maybe have the same. I talk about a relationship as being like a recipe. So you have the raw ingredients, which are the people in it, the things that can't be changed, and then you have what you do with them. And I think a lot of people have had the same raw ingredients as you, but they've got stuck with the recipe, and that's why their relationships have not lasted, because of so much friction. So,
wait, can I give a tip right there? Something I just thought of when you were saying that. When we were having our hard years, we looked for help. There were people who would volunteer. When we were young and didn't have a lot of money and needed some help, we connected ourselves with some really neat people. And if somebody would say, hey, I'm glad to meet with you for a few conversations, if you guys want to talk it out and kind of work through this, we took advantage of the people who said, hey, I'd be glad to help you with your marriage if you want it. When you're offering that help, when a person who's farther along in the journey than you offers help, take advantage of it. unless you think they really don't mean it, in which case, here in the South, sometimes we need to say things 2 or 3 times for people to know we mean it. It's our culture a little bit, but when you say it, and we took up with that, we have met with a couple who did our premarital counseling, and we met with another couple who we were friends with, and they said, come and spend some time with us and we'll have some conversation with you. And we did that. And, and then we've also gotten therapy and counseling over the years with various people to help us. Sometimes it's so hard to get out of your own mind to say what you need to say. Mark and I speak different languages. Our personalities are so different that we don't always understand. We just don't understand each other. So sometimes I say, go and get yourself an interpreter. And there've been people that I volunteered. I say, hey, if you guys want to have a few conversations with us to help you work through that. I know maybe you don't have the money for counseling. We're not therapists, but we're glad to do that, and have had very few people take us up on that. And so
very few,
not very many.
Yeah. See, as you know, I'm from the UK, and it doesn't seem, I talk to a lot of people in the States who it seems to have more religious connections, who have people from the church they can have counselling from. It doesn't seem to be that much here, where I haven't heard people say, we had these friends that had this, or we could get this counselling. But it doesn't surprise me that not that many people take up, because people have this kind of false pride or this sense of like they have to pretend that everything's okay, which actually stops them from being able to fix things.
Yeah. Or they feel indebted or something like that. And so that's what I would hope to say to your listeners is, if somebody invites you to help, take them up on it. You're going to expose yourself. Yes. But if you want to, in fact, get better and improve your marriage, sometimes the option is, am I heading down the road of, depression, disaster, divorce? Wouldn't you rather open your life up to another couple who you like, at least give a few things a try before you head down that rough road? So the alternative might be terrible.
Yeah, it's very true. So you've talked about being very different and there being problems and you got through them. But I'm interested in, how did the problems show up? How did you notice? Do you know what I mean? In what form? Was it you were getting fed up? Was it you were rowing, or how did it?
Oh yes, we would row. It's a great word.
And it's kind of.
Or is that a noun? We would have rows.
I think it's both.
Yeah. Yes, we would fight. We would have arguments, and I, being a personality with a big personality, I tend to be more emotionally expressive. And well, what does that look like, Monica? Well, it looks like being emotionally expressive. People who are emotionally expressive, they tend to laugh well, cry well, and be angry. Well, I don't know. I don't know about the being angry well part, but emotionally expressive people, they tend to emote everything easier, which is generally can be helpful for some situations, because I'm sorry, I want to turn off my phone because I don't want it to interrupt us in case something comes in. When we get in a situation where we're having a fight, I'm wanting to have the conversation. I am digging in. I want to have the conversation. Let's finish this. And I'm kind of impassioned in it. Well, he'll talk to me or he'll listen to me. But remember, I said he's a contemplative. And so he's also an internal processor. So I'm processing by talking, and either I'm crying or I'm having conversation. Maybe I'm laughing, maybe I'm angry, whatever. Well, he's much more passive, and he's hearing what I'm saying, but then he's not as emotionally expressive. So he's less tolerant for my emotional expressive. Initially this was the way it was. Why can't you just logically have a conversation? Oh, I think this logic emotion thing is such a huge thing in relationship. Isn't it, Rob? It's like, you need to calm down and speak logically. Well, don't you have any feelings, blah, blah, blah. And so there's that thing. And certainly being angry is so... you seldom have good results when you're very angry. And he almost never gets angry. So that was something that I knew that I need to figure out how to verbalize better. And that was something that I spent a lot of energy focusing on Where does my anger come from? Why am I angry? How do I express what I need to say better so that he can hear me? So I'm trying to learn to speak in a way that he could hear me. And he had to learn to step up and say what he wanted more clearly. But here's the thing with internal and external processors, and this is really huge, because we would have a fight, and often it would be late in the day, we'd be tired, and we actually happened to come to the conclusion of going to bed and talking about it tomorrow is actually better. This thing of trying to not go to bed angry, we're just, it didn't work for us. So we'd go to bed. You don't always sleep after those conversations, but we go to bed and have a conversation in the morning. I wasn't so emotionally charged, and he'd had at least a little bit of time to process. So we were both in a better mindset where we could talk through things. But that's what we did. We would sit, and I would say from my perspective, and he would say from his perspective. We'd try and learn the tools that we got through counseling or marriage conferences, to communicate better, and we would apply that. So I think everybody has fights of some sort. Almost everybody. I mean, you hear some people who say they never do, but I think if they never have fights, that's because somebody's shutting the other person down, and so it's figuring out, how do you communicate, and then looking for, just always growing in that, trying to communicate better. But we would fight just like most people. The difference is that because we were committed to find a solution to it. And we were committed to learn to communicate better. We knew there were better ways to communicate. We knew we were young and could grow in this. And we were committed to be growth-focused individuals, where if I learn to communicate better with you, that's also going to help how I communicate better with my kids and in the culture, in my work. We had some sense of that this was kind of part of growing up and becoming more mature. But yeah, there were fights. Yep. Yeah. Disagreements. Yep.
Okay. So what I'm interested in finding out is, so a lot of people in your situation would have written it off to, we're incompatible. We're just so different. We can't live together.
Get along. Right.
And like you've said, I like the quote from Dan Weil where he says, when you marry someone, you marry a set of problems. I don't know if you've heard that before.
I haven't heard that, but that's really good. It's true.
And it says, like, if I married Anne, I've got a certain set of problems. And if I married Julia, I wouldn't have those problems, but I'd have a different set of problems. And, right. And so whoever you marry, there is going to be a set of problems.
Yep.
It's just about working which of the set you can work around. And the Gottmans, they talk about there being perpetual problems and it's perpetual problems and solvable problems. So solvable problems are temporary. They're based on the situation. Like maybe you have a problem because your kid's at school and that's causing a problem, but that's temporary. That's going to change. But the real determination of whether a marriage is successful, as in if it's fulfilling and happy, or whether it's not, is can you resolve the perpetual problems? Yeah. And I think what you've been talking about is the perpetual problems of the differences in communicating, the differences. So you've come to quite a clear, you've been able to articulate the differences in personality. I'm just wondering, what are the perpetual, there's going to be perpetual problems that you're like you've talked about, the arguing,
yeah.
And learning how to, that process. What other perpetual problems have you had that you've worked out how to resolve?
Well, I've got one that I can use as an example. This was a 15-year-long problem. This was one of our big ones that we just couldn't get over it. And so I'll give you an example, because also kind of the way out shows how you tie the personality profiles into getting out of those perpetual problems. This particular one is that my husband is a really neat person, and he likes things neat, like the house neat. He likes things neat, and he doesn't like clutter around. And I am glad you can't see my desk right now. Okay.
I've just moved my things out.
Right. Well, this is my neat little stage. I create my sweet space here to be on video. But so this was something we when we were young, we would just, why can't you clean up a little bit better? Why, blah, blah, blah. Can we keep the space neat? And we just couldn't. He could not stand the clutter. And I was too much off doing this and doing that. And I was not about, picking up things as I went and putting them away. And it just wasn't important to me. Until, so kind of here's how we kind of got out of that over the years was he would try and figure out how it made him feel when the house was a mess. So he would say something like, when the house is a mess, I can't think, I can't do work, I don't feel creative, and I feel like I have to go clean it up. It just drives me to clean it up. And so he said, my mind is cluttered. It's just not a space where I can work. And we were all four of us living in the house with the two kids, and his business was in the house, and our first house was quite small. So all of our first homes up until, we were married about 10 years, we had very small homes. And so, it just created this constant state of stress for him, which of course would then add to his inability to communicate and be friends with me because he's, that was stressed, and he'd have that stress space. We would call it like a stress cup full or your anger cup full. Your space where you're filling up with that was filled up with clutter would make him have a harder time getting along, and taking care of our relationship. So he was expressing that. And I could actually see that because I also then knew as I'm listening and, when a space was clean, I did feel a little more relaxed and I did feel more creative in my thinking. So I also then, began to take what he said as the way he saw things and apply that to me in my life and say, well, having the neat space is kind of, it is good for me too. And I find I'm a little bit more creative as well. So I started looking at that, but then he also had to say, it's not the end of the world if I run out the door and go run some errands and don't have the kitchen cleaned up for a moment, So he learned that relaxing is a little bit on it is an okay thing too. And he could let a certain amount of that go. Okay. So that was part of it was I recognized the beauty in what he needed and he recognized the freedom in a little bit of where I was living. So that created some. The other was in finding our personalities, being who I am and who he is. His personality just likes order better. That's what they do. Okay, so that's just part of who you are. You need the order. So one was understanding how he felt, and he understood how I felt. The second was acceptance of, it doesn't matter how much we understand each other, he's always going to need the house to be cleaner. So we accepted that as, that's the way he is, this is the way I am. Okay, we have to find a middle ground. We also with that did the 5 love languages book and started to understand how his gifts of service and his cleaning up, and he would, he needed me to clean up so that he could feel loved by me. That was something he felt love when I would participate in that. But part of his acceptance was, okay, I can't control Monica all the time. The whole house is not always going to be clean all the time, but I can manage these 3 rooms. So he chose the kitchen, our main living space, and his office. And so he would tend to those and always keep them clean. But then my acceptance was he needs it. So I committed to make more attempt to put things away more quickly when I came in the house, get the groceries away, bring in stuff that you've been shopping, put that away as quickly as possible. So I just became more committed to be attentive to it. And he became more committed to the rooms that he needed. So he didn't worry about our bedroom so much. He didn't worry about the kids' rooms and things like that. So it was just choosing what am I going to manage and making progress. That's one of my life, I don't know what mottos or whatever. Keep making progress. We didn't get there, that easily. And like I said, this was something we worked on for 15 years solid before we got to a place of peacefulness. But now our house is picked up most of the time, most of it. And a couple things that we're at now is, one, we do have someone who comes and cleans our house. So we know that every other week we're going to have everything picked up and the house will be clean. At least that'll go for a few days. So he gets that pleasure of having that done all at the same time. And I'm, again, more attentive, because here's what happens too. When, for us, like in this specific, there was a reward. When you had your house clean and neat, this was a reward for me, was I like having people over, and I'm not too worried about it if there's a few things laying around, because that's how people live, but I also like it being where I can have people over and feel comfortable with it. So a little bit of clutter, I don't mind, but I love that people come to our house, they feel comfortable, they relax in our house, and I love having that ability to create hospitality. And part of that comes from the fact that our house is always in order. So when someone comes over, they feel at home, and we can just put together a quick dinner, and we can do spontaneity and have spontaneous events. And so that's been my reward of having it, is because I'm the social person, I'm the extrovert, but I'm busy. So I can't always make all the appointments in advance. And that way I can feel free to have people to my house spontaneously. So rewards. And I know he's more at peace when the house is cleaner, and he relaxes more. And so we've seen that, the process, understanding, acceptance, and then reward in working through the solution over years, over the time period. Does that kind of answer your question? I thought that might be a good example.
Yes, no, it does. It does very well. What's really interesting is that journey took 15 years.
Yes, it did take. I remember I locked that in there. It took us 15 or more years to get through that.
So a lot of people would have said, like, 5 years, I was tried for 5 years, it's still not changed. And a lot of people would have given up. So I think what happens is people, they lose that kind of bond. They change the way that they feel about someone. And so those differences then become incompatibility, and, we've grown apart, or we're too different, we can't work. And that's when people decide that the relationship's not going to work. During those 15 years, how did you feel about each other? Did you, like, obviously having resolved it, you're going to have that kind of bond that you had in the beginning. Right. But was there a time when you lost that feeling for each other?
Okay. There's not like yes, I knew there was a season when we weren't really attracted to each other. I don't have that kind of a story. It was more of the occasional times was the pain in this particular item that we're discussing is too painful, and are we going to get through this? It's just, there was occasionally this asking of, it might last a week, it might last a month. We had one issue later on in our marriage that was quite painful and lasted quite a bit longer. But when you live with that, it's kind of in your mind, but you're also still, you're going to work, you're raising your kids, you're eating together. You're still doing other things that are fun. So like the thing with the house, and even the other issue that was painful, we didn't live in it all the time. I don't want to say we lived in denial. I know plenty of people are great at living in denial, but every issue isn't sitting just right here at the front of your brain all the time. And we had other mechanisms in place to be engaging in our marriage in good ways. We had committed times for conversation. We were committed to having date nights when we were able to have a babysitter, or, even before we had kids. And so those things weren't like the only thing right here in front of our eyeballs. There was other good things going along as well that helped it to be fun, and to, that we could laugh, and we planned a trip, and so we were still living life in a positive way. These were just the undercurrents of painful things that would come up, when something got too much, the pile of things got too much, either the literal things or the emotional things, and blah, then, and we tend to go, like the house and the things of being neat could have easily been a catalyst for, there's something else emotional going on inside of me that I don't know how to express. So let's fight about the house again. Well, that's not really the issue. That's another question that we have in our life. Sometimes when we're getting upset over something that seems foolish or small, we started this young, gratefully. We said, okay, what's really going on here? What's the real topic of conversation here? And you have to be careful. That question can become patronizing if it's used with the wrong tone of voice, and it has accelerated some, conversations at times as well. But that's a real principle, is we argue about things when often it's not that. What we really feel isn't about the thing that you're arguing. It's about something deeper.
Yeah. That's well, actually, you've covered a lot of the things that I kind of write about and that. But one of them is I talk about the hard landscape and the soft landscape. I think you have to operate from the truth. And the hard landscape is the facts, the truth. And the soft landscape is there's all the stories and the interpretations and the things that we ascribe to the other person. We say, oh, we didn't take out the trash because he just doesn't care. And he's left the tooth cap off the toothpaste because he's just trying to get at me. And all these kind of things, people make these stories and then they have this bitterness. But like you say, if you can just deal with the real issue, I mean, you might not be able to resolve it straight away, but you're able to at least know what you're fighting about and not then make it personal, which sounds like something what you've done. Like the key, I think, to a relationship, the one thing that you need to focus on is the bond. It's the bond of how you feel about each other. And if you maintain that, you can withstand any challenge. But when you let, whether it's children, whether it's, the differences in personality and tidiness and untidiness or whatever it is, when you let those come between you or like other family members and things that come, when you let them come between you, that becomes a wedge that it's then wedges you apart. So it sounds like you've been very conscious of that bond. So you talked about taking up people on the offer of people who were a little further along the marriage path, and it sounds like you've been to conferences and picked up tips. But where did the drive come from to maintain that bond?
We have a marriage that overall, and I thought this even earlier on, was I wanted to marry this man because he has core values. He has the faith. He has strength of character. He has things about him, strengths and beautiful things that I love. And those core things are always there. And honestly, there have been times when we've had challenges and we work it out because the thought of getting a divorce and starting over with someone else, it's like, oh my gosh, it's going to be way easier to work this out and share together. As painful as it is to work through this thing that's difficult, it's going to be way less painful than getting a divorce and, uprooting our kids, living in two houses, and then trying to find another person and trying to get to know them. Here's kind of a loose example. We say, when you have a car, and sometimes it's got a couple of issues with it, and you think, well, if you can't upgrade to a better car, you could sell your car and go buy another car that might be similar or maybe a couple years older. But the car that you understand, the quirkiness of your car, how you've taken care of it, the benefits of it. The car is going to be better than the car that's going to come with other weird issues that you don't know how to handle. You don't know their level of commitment. And so it's kind of like that in the relationship is, being here and being committed to this is better than trying to go out. And it comes for some people, you go through this so long or it's gone so far down the road and it's irreparable. So I don't want people to hear me say that, no marriage, every marriage should be worked through and stayed in, because some are really bad and I acknowledge that and they have really deeper issues. But when you're talking about two people who are generally normal, they all have some problems and issues, but if they're communicating with you and talking with you, the problems you have and that you've already started to work with are potentially more manageable than going out and taking on a new set of problems, in a new person. And then it's like you just said, the problems, there's always problems. And when you're going on to a second relationship, well, now you have maybe more additional children, you have more family members to get to know. So it's not even just the person, it's all of the rest of their world.
Yeah, definitely. I think most couples, it's usually just like needing to learn certain skills, relational communication skills. But most couples have got more to gain by staying together and working it out, because it's quite hard to find someone that you can live with for even just a few years. If you can live with someone for a few years, most of the time, of course, like you say, there are some marriages, some situations where it's healthier to get out. But in most cases, right, it's just a matter of understanding. It's just a matter of being able to relate and communicate. I remember reading Jed Diamond's. Jed Diamond has a 5-step relationship model. And I can't remember exactly the stages. It's like honeymoon stage. It's like sort of getting to know each other, the sort of niggly part. And then it's the part where it's kind of disillusionment and boredom. Yep. And that is the stage where most couples break and they go, oh, we lost it all. But he said, actually, it's getting past those stages where the real, like the deep companionable love and the real meaning of like marriage and lifelong relationship, where the real benefits come in. From what you were saying, it sounded like yours was quite early on. Was after those like 5 to 7 years, did you then have, he said this normally comes in about 15, 20 years, where this kind of stage is where people become sort of disillusioned, bored, and they think like, is this it?
I'd say that probably came in at 15 or 20. Yeah. Okay. Later on as well. Because the early one was just kind of the initial
working
part
out,
of, yeah, and realizing, wow, you're more than I thought you were, because when you date someone, you still only learn so much about them. And so the first one was just, wow, there's a lot more going on here than I realized. And then getting the help and working through that. But yeah, then we raised our kids and ran our businesses and, still learned more about each other and lived life and tried to live life in a way that was dynamic and purposeful. And, so always growing with that. And then the kids get to be teenagers. And, for us, our kids' teen years our kids they went along fairly evenly. It wasn't a hugely dramatic time. And so that's probably it. Then you got these kids, they're teenagers. So then you kind of have to find out, okay, who are we again? Let's go on dates again. Do we like the same things? And something that helped us actually during those years when our kids were old enough to be at home, we actually bought a motorcycle. Bought a Harley Davidson motorcycle. My husband had loved to ride as a young man, and we hadn't had anything like that. And I was like, I don't know about this, and it was expensive. And one of my girlfriends said to me, that motorcycle is way cheaper than a divorce. I said, you are so right. And so this motorcycle turned out to be probably, now that you're saying it that way and I'm thinking of it, probably a big part of helping us get through those boredom years. We, instead of just going on dates to the same old places, we took motorcycle trips. We met some new people. We just kind of had a new lifestyle that gave us interest in each other in a new way and interest in life. So it might be time then for a good hobby. If you don't like motorcycling, when I was growing up, my parents at that time, we had bought an RV, a recreational vehicle. And, America is so big and there's so many places to go and different places to stay. So we had an RV and we went to the lake regularly and took a couple of big trips when I was a teenager. And so I always wanted to do that with my kids as well. And so I think when you get to that boredom phase, it might be nice to say, wow, is there some new hobby? Even on a remote thing, here's kind of a funny thing I'm thinking about doing this year is, I want to see the play Hamilton. It's coming to my city. I've already seen it, but I want to see it here. And, but you're probably only going to get tickets if you buy season tickets. And I love the theater, but I've never bought season tickets. So now I'm kind of looking at it as like, well, if I get the season tickets, maybe I'll just enjoy that as a way to go out this year and kind of a fun adventure this year. And I'll go see a bunch of great plays and it'll be fun. So even something like that, that could be a new thing is, gosh, we're a little bored. Why don't we plan a once a month to that music place we like to go to, or, theater, or something that you can agree upon. I mean, probably one of the partners is going to like what you're doing more than the other. But, even though I was not necessarily wanting to go be, a biker chick, he loved it. I was on board with that. It was a new adventure for me as well. And so I especially think men will grow through play more than women. It's easier for us to just sit around, drink a cup of coffee, a glass of wine, have some tea on the porch, and just sit and talk. And we tend to do that easier. But men like to grow in relationship with play. They do that with each other. And I think they really love it when their wives will go and play with them, riding a bike, go to the car show, whatever. So I think when you get to the boredom space, if you haven't had time or money, can you find some time and money to go develop a new hobby together? And that'll give you some new interests and you'll meet some new people.
Yeah, I think that's really important. What I see a lot is couples break up around usually about 20 years, 22, 23, 25.
Yeah.
And often it's like, as a generalization, for the man, it's really important to be respected and to feel like they're important, and they feel that they have some competence, skill, that kind of thing. And I think when you're like 20 years into a relationship, your wife doesn't look at you like that anymore. Your kids don't look at you like that anymore. And you kind of like, did you put the trash out? Did you do this? And then someone's got, but by that time, a lot of people have reached a certain level in their work or some expertise or something. And then they often have like maybe someone that they're mentoring is like younger and an attractive girl that's kind of looking up and going, oh, I'm learning all this thing. And suddenly, they feel like they've got that importance, and they go home and it's like, oh, I did this in my work. I did this one. They go, oh yeah, you did that last week as well, didn't you? And then like nobody's interested at home. Yeah. And there's a lot of that kind of male ego where you need that validation from someone else. And when they get it from someone else and someone else finds them attractive and like to a colleague, especially if it's someone younger, they've got like something that they can show them. They're more of a man of the world and they're more experienced in that, and they're kind of looking up to them. And the man feels like, whoa, like I've suddenly got this lease of life that I haven't had for 10 years.
Yeah.
So I think that's really, like you say, that sense of having that Harley Davidson or some kind of hobby give your husband and other men a sense of that new thing of that they're developing some skill. And again, like you say, men typically aren't so good at talking about things openly or consciously, but it's like they know how they feel and they just want something to feel that way. And so having that kind of thing fills that gap and is a way of getting over that.
Having the hobby along the line with what you were saying, I totally agree. That's a very normal thing, and it comes with the stage of life. I mean, it may be 20 years or it may be at 45 years old. It's kind of one or the other. They seem to come similarly for a lot of people. But if you have the hobby thing, you get out of the household routine. And that's one of the things it did for us was we let the house go. It's like you leave it behind. Don't stay in the house. Don't worry about the trash. Let's go do our hobby. Let's go be another version of ourselves. When you've been married 20 years, you're so immersed in the routine of the house and the kids and everything like there. And it does feel kind of rote and tiresome. So if you can find a way to go be adults again and to have the adult conversation and to meet other people, then I think in theory, both of you can become more attractive to the other person again outside of it. You can create that romance that that you say that a man's recognizing by this other person looking up to them. You can create that when you get away from just the constant of, the day in, day out stuff and get into something more interesting.
Yeah, it's getting out of that rut. and you see each other differently, and you feel differently.
All of a sudden you get to be impressed. Wow, that was interesting conversation. Or I didn't know you knew that person. Or, you begin to see them in another light, and it's healthy. It's good.
So when would you say, like, was there a stage when you got past that and then you felt, did you feel like it kind of shifted in a stage? You said like 15 to 20 years, there was that kind of a little bit of boredom, and then did that pass?
Well, the motorcycle season was good. And then we also went through the empty nest season when our kids were both leaving and growing up. And because we had been committed, and I want to say one thing that we did that starting pretty young that we learned with the 5 love languages. I told you my husband loved acts of service and I loved quality time. And so we committed to sit down and have conversation every day. When I teach classes and I tell people this, they say, how long did you talk to each other? And I say, 1 hour. And their eyes get real big and they can't even imagine just sitting and having an hour-long conversation with their spouse every day. And I'll tell you, we used like question cards and books and things like that to help us. We didn't always have something to talk about, and it wasn't always great. But and I would say start with a half an hour. If you can't imagine an hour, that's okay. So we were doing that all through our marriage. And so that created some sense of awareness of, oh, well, okay, our kids are empty nesting. So, we had created space to have conversations. So we would naturally talk about that. What's going to change, being at home now that this is changing? How does that affect our relationship? And so we would kind of observe some of these phases as they were happening. And I loved my kids at every age. And that was kind of a commitment, was I'm not going to long for babies. And I think my kids as adults are just awesome. And it's so exciting. But I loved having the kids in every age. So we tried to be present, in the moment as we were in it. We also observed when we get to various stages, specifically the empty nest. That was kind of that phase, like you said, with the boredom, and then their kids went away and they didn't know each other because they hadn't really spent time hanging out together, and then they were bored and they didn't like each other anymore. And that's when we saw a lot of divorces, maybe between the 20 and 27 year, age. And some of those were, they'd been years moving toward that place. So, I've seen some of them trying to work out, and some of them, it didn't work out. They'd been distracted from each other for so long that there really wasn't anything there. So the question I would always ask myself is, after we'd have a big row, or a season of a specific kind of themed row, if you will, I'd keep thinking, okay, we're over that now. Are we done? Are we in a safe place? Are we going to stop having them now? Are we in a good place? Or are we in the forever good place now? And honestly, I think we're there now. I will say that. But when your life changes, when your career situation or your health, once you get to be married, you're after 50, health issues kind of start becoming a factor, which affect your ability to work, and all those respect issues and places I need to be now are affected also by health and things like that. So that can become another factor. And, we've had some of those in our family. So we had to say, okay, how are we going to work through the health factor? Or you just have other permanent changes. And my point in this is, if you don't have the structure to keep talking and growing through those, any one of those could derail you. There are so many life changes that come through that could derail people. We've had friends who had a stillborn baby, and that derailed their marriage. And, I don't know all the details of it, but I know that it affected both of them so deeply, they didn't come back together. So there are all kinds of things that could happen in life that are really hard that could derail a marriage, and I think about some of those. That's another thing I do too, is I proactively look ahead and say, if this happened, could I deal with it? And sometimes the answer is, wow, I don't know that I could deal with it, but I look around and say, but I know people who have dealt with it who could help me. I'm already looking around for my support group and my friends that could help me with something terrible if it happened. And so just like, getting with friends when we were younger and needing help and just understanding each other, I know that I have friends who can help me get through something else that might be very difficult to get through. I think we've kind of arrived at kind of a final place. Does that mean we're not ever going to have a fight again? No, probably not. Because, sometimes I still get stressed. And even though I've learned to manage my emotional reactions through a lot of intentionality in my life, sometimes I'm still that way. And sometimes he's still distracted and he has other things that have changed in his life. So we just keep talking. But if people don't have a basis to have good conversation, I don't know how they get through some of the hard things, to be quite frank. And I can see why they derail a marriage, because there's a lot of things in life that are hard, and being able to talk about them is what has helped us get through them. So do I think you ever get there? Yeah, maybe. But I definitely think there's plateaus and peaceful places where you get to. It's not always hard. It's not always been hard. Yeah. Life is hard, but your marriage doesn't have to be, if you're committed to work on it.
Yeah. It's kind of like you say, seasons.
Yes.
You get a season where the sun is shining and the clouds are out and everything's wonderful, and then you get the winter season where it's a little bit harder.
Yeah, a little bit lonelier. But get some help then. Be with your friends and get some help. And get out of it.
Yeah. Okay. There's two things there that I'd like to ask you a little bit more about. One, you said was about having the structure. Throughout your marriage, you've had the structure, as in that you always had the ability to have that conversation.
Right.
But when you talk about structure, I'm just curious what exactly you mean.
Well, for us, that structure, we were kind of going as two ships in the night, with the love language thing. And like I say, I'm going all the time, and I was leaving the house, and, finally we looked at me and said, gosh, if you're going to be gone all the time, go get a job, make some money. And so we spent a lot of time figuring out what would be a good job for me. And so I was gone all the time and doing my job, and my husband was working at home. And at this point, the kids were in school, but he was trying to love me with his acts of service. And, he's awesome like that. He's the kind of guy, you go out of town, come back, and he's put in the new washer and dryer. And isn't it that nice? And well, it is really nice and it's fantastic, but it's not that didn't make me feel loved. But man, sit down with me and talk to me and let's have some great conversation, which ironically, he likes to have conversation too. For some people, they might not want to have conversation, but it means let's watch a movie together, or, people who really love sports would love to have their spouse enjoy sports with them, So for us, we found it to be conversation, and my husband actually enjoys deep conversation as well. So he kind of realized once we started doing this that it was good. So what we did was we would talk after the kids went to bed. Before we went to bed, we would take 1 hour. So we could still have like another hour of reading or watching TV or something like that. But while we were building the habit, it was very little TV, because that was before Netflix, when you could kind of, guide your time. But we would sit and talk for 1 hour. That was kind of our commitment, was we're going to have a conversation. It was at the end of the day. We'd have a cup of tea or a glass of wine or a beer and just sit and have an hour's worth of conversation to kind of wind down. Well, you may know having conversation of some kind isn't always a wind down. So sometimes we would wind down and we just had good conversation. We'd talk about a day. We had great conversations and go to bed. Sometimes we'd have amazing conversations and we'd get all excited and worked up because this was such a great conversation. And we'd talk about things of the spirit, and we'd talk about things of our money and things about our emotional health. And, so sometimes we'd have these really awesome dig-in conversations. And then other times, to be honest, we were tired and we were cranky and we started down a line and it did not end well. You're fighting and screaming and going to bed angry. But the thing that my husband always said to me, I would say to him sometimes about me bringing up these things, and it was usually me again, because I'm the one who has that emotional edge. I would ask him, what do you think about that? Does it wear you out that we get to that point? And he said, I never love it when we fight. That's not a good thing. He says, but what I love is you bring things to the surface. We don't live in denial. We don't sweep things under the rug. We have open, honest conversations about things, and you bring that to our conversations. He said, I love that openness that we have in the conversations. And you bring that because you have such a passion for the truth and such a passion to bring things out into the open, so he had the choice to either engage with me in that or not. And he chose to engage. And so our structure was every night. But I would encourage anybody to have, they can have different kinds of structures. Some people have some time together in the morning. For some people, it's a date night every week. They go out the certain night every week, and that's their time they have together. It doesn't have to be exactly that. I mean, I do encourage married couple to have more conversation than they have, but it doesn't have to be an hour every day like ours. But if you have that mechanism in place for conversation and for listening to the other person, then when something's hard, you already have that in place. And so it's going to be easier to talk about health issues and how you feel with that, or, sex and the changes that happen as we age. You're going to be able to have those conversations better when you're already having good communication together.
Okay, that makes sense. The other part was you said that you talked about the importance of a support network.
Yes.
So how would someone go about that? How have you built? Because it sounds like you've done that quite consciously.
Yes.
You've built.
Yeah. For us, because we were in a community of faith, young, that is a situation that allows for community. People are getting together. They know the value of having friendships and being involved with other people. So people tended to come together more easily. You didn't always make long friends, but it was easily at least to connect with people and learn and make those friendships. So our faith community was a big place where we connected with people, especially early on. Other places that I've connected over the years that, we've kind of come in and out of are I've been a real estate agent for a number of years. And so I've connected well with some of the agents and professionals there. And Mark comes with me to events sometimes. So we found some good connections with people there. We've joined meetup groups where we've met other people. And I'm out there all the time. So for me, I meet lots of people. For him being an introvert, it usually occurs a little bit more intentionally and over time. And one of the things that I've found has been good for us is the fact that we've lived in this same town our whole married life, actually. We haven't moved a lot. And if you've moved a lot, that's a challenge. I'm going to, say that up front. It makes it more difficult. But if you're in the same town, you get to know people, you meet people, but we have done it intentionally. It's been like, wow, that's a really great couple. I want to hang around them more. And one of the things that we did to encourage those relationships was we never waited for people to be friends with us. If we saw somebody who was really fantastic that we'd like to hang out with, we'd invite them over for dinner. And then you just see where it goes. And so maybe we meet with them again and we go on and have a great friendship. Maybe we only meet with them once or twice, but if there's some kind of social circle, it still strengthens our relationship. Even if you just see them at the ball field or you see them at in town at the grocery store, so having people over to your house to eat, and I like to have them to my house to eat because then you don't have to worry about leaving the restaurant because you're staying at a table too long and, but people who don't feel as good having people over, they'll go out to eat, and have dinner. Another thing that I've noticed in my neighborhood, we live in an area where we have a lot of new construction. And so in our area, we've had a lot of people moving here from outside of the area. And how do they get to know people? And I see neighborhood social committees. They've been a really good way to connect people when you come, when you move a lot. If you can engage in your neighborhood social committee, a lot of the social committee are just going to the events and being, again, intentional to meet people, follow up with a dinner, follow up with another event. Don't just let that be the thing. Those relationships seldom come passively. You have to say, I want to be connected and I want to have people in my life. And it comes with an openness. A couple has to decide, I'm okay with letting those people in my life. I want to live with at least a mostly honest, I mean, we often have things that we don't want to share, but I'm going to live with a mostly honest perspective, and I'm going to go in with fairly open hands to try and listen, at least believing there's some good for me here.
Okay. Just going to ask you some of the biggest mistakes that you see other people making with their relationships.
Oh, wow. I see people not spending time having conversation, which we've already talked about. I see people in debt. They're financial in debt, and that creates just this high level of stress all the time. People are like, well, don't tell me what to do with my money. I can be free. It's like, well, that's true, but I know when you're in debt, it doesn't give you the freedom to buy a motorcycle or, take some weekends away or have date nights. When you're in debt, it's just this constant money stress. So I think being too much in debt and not talking about money is a mistake and a stress point. And there's lots of financial programs now to help you, again, take a little conference, take a class, take a meetup where people are talking about financial health. So I think that's one. I will say, not talking about your feelings. We have to learn to use better words to talk about our feeling. Words like disappointment, frustration, not just I feel sad or happy, I feel lonely, and then digging into the why of that, using better words. But one thing, and this is one point that I would really love to leave with your listeners. I see so many people not able to laugh. And honestly, that's one of the greatest things that my husband and I have together. We laugh. And I'd like to tell you a little bit how that came about because I didn't laugh so well before we got married. In my family of origin, we tended to be a little bit more serious. And my one brother, he was the cut up and he would always entertain us, and that was great. So I was kind of serious, even though it's kind of fun and, a little rambunctious. I didn't laugh as well as I could. And I have a really great laugh, actually, when you kind of get it going. And so, but my husband, he has a really great laugh, and he would laugh so well. And when we first got married, he was making fun of me all the time. Well, okay, so initially that didn't go over well. And he also came into our marriage with a gift of sarcasm. So I would say that's a communication mistake, is using sarcasm, because he would say something and, it didn't last very long. And I just looked right at him and I was like, that's unacceptable. If you have something to say to me, you're going to say it to me, but don't make fun of me like that, because I know that's just a backhanded punch. Okay. So sarcasm is not healthy. It doesn't get to solutions. Oh, I'm just kidding. I'm just joking, and it gives people this excuse rather than coming directly into something. And so if you got something to say, then say it, don't be sarcastic. So once he got over the sarcasm, though, he's still real punny and funny and loves to make fun of things. He loves to laugh. So gratefully, he worked on that and, began, because I was direct, he was direct back with me. And, we encouraged that in each other. But then he also would just laugh at me all the time over these little things that I did. And we all have these quirky things, I have this funny cough and I have these other little things that I do, little quirky things. And he would laugh at me. And I'd be like, giving him a face, and don't laugh at me, or, that makes me feel bad. And he's like, why can't you just entertain me? If the way I cough can make him laugh, oh my gosh, let him laugh. Cause I'm still going to cough like that. And quite frankly, it's kind of funny when I cough like that, And so he taught me to take myself less seriously, which totally led the way for me, even as a public speaker, to let people laugh at me. I am so okay with myself, and if I do something that's really stupid or funny, please laugh. And he taught me that, he said, honey, that's no big deal. Just let me laugh. And, and laughter, we could go on and on about how good it is for your health and how it releases stress and how it does endorphins and all these good things. But people don't often laugh well. And they take offense when people laugh, or they're worried they're talking about me or something like that. And it's like, oh my gosh, just please laugh at me. And so
I saw that actually on your website, isn't it? You're welcome to laugh with or at us as much as you like.
Yes, please. Yeah. Laugh at me, laugh with me. because I'm not going to take myself so seriously. I'm so tired of, worrying so much about what other people think. And does that mean I never embarrass myself? No, sometimes I still get embarrassed, and sometimes I still say to Mark, don't laugh at me about that. I'm serious. Don't laugh at me, but I want happiness, and that laughter has just been such a gift that we've developed. I mean, you can say we have it as a gift, but I'll come back and say, yeah, but it's one we've developed. And I get sad when I see couples. One of the couples might be kind of funny and like to laugh and can create those scenarios. And then the other partner puts them down and says, don't laugh about that. Or they take offense, or they get all serious and stuff. And I think if we all laughed easier, especially right now, or, let's laugh a little bit more and take ourselves less seriously, and create more joy in the world.
Yeah, I do think there's been a lot of, it's like political correctness.
Yeah.
And there is a problem there. We have been, there have been groups that have been marginalized and discriminated against and whatever. But it becomes that the pressure to fight for that and make people aware of that has become another way that we repress people in ways that you're not free to talk, and you're not free to laugh at this, or you're not free to laugh at that. And I think that as a society, it's become, because most comedians, where their laughs come from is poking fun at the absurdity of us all.
Right.
And it's just, taking ourselves less seriously and not having limits on what we can laugh at. I think it's always the intention rather than the content of what I said.
Yep. So laugh at me. I can start with that, laugh at me. And, because I know as much as I talk, I know I'm going to say things that sometimes are a little inappropriate, or sometimes out, or very often goofy. Laugh, please. Please laugh at me. Because then I will laugh with you. So I think I think we've covered a lot of the things that I think. That one more thing though that just came into my mind, that Mark and I have talked through this as well, that you mentioned about men needing respect, and everybody does want to have a certain amount of respect. But another thing that I see is painful, that I see in public, is people belittling each other, spouses belittling each other in public, and not laughing. Somebody will do something funny and the other person will rebuke them. And that stuff doesn't need to happen in public. Have I done it? Yes. Has my husband done it? Probably not as much as me. And here's the thing, for people who rebuke their partners in public, who really looks bad?
Yeah.
It's not the person who messed up.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the person doing the rebuking. So, the person who's upset and embarrassed by their partner, when they start yelling at them, they're the ones who really are looking embarrassing, really, So, and that's been me, because again, I'm the more outspoken, the more passionate one. If I'd say something to my husband in public, he's embarrassed, so he feels small, but in fact, I'm the one who looks bad.
Yeah.
So try and keep that, just try and look for better words and try and express yourself clearly rather than harshly. That just, anger and belittling, that doesn't move anywhere positive. So if those are the way that you communicate, it's not going to flip overnight, but just keep working on it, because you can make that improvement. I have. As a recovered angry person. I choose to laugh now instead of be angry.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Where I always see it is in the supermarket. I see it the supermarket, the airport, and children's play areas.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, if you go in any supermarket, like on a Saturday afternoon, you just see the way couples talk to each other, and there is that real, trying to belittle someone over the brand of bread that they picked up. Yeah. Yeah.
Choose a higher road.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's been great talking to you. It's been fascinating. All the lessons that you've learned, I think, is a real model and a kind of roadmap really for people to learn from. So thank you.
Well, and it's just been so intentional. That's what I want your listeners to hear, is that it doesn't happen just because you're alive. No. Our marriage is good because we've been intentional. We've read books. We've gone to conferences. We've had counseling. We have conversations. It's taken work, and we put the work in it, and it's been well worth it. it's a privilege.
Yeah. I think so many people just don't think there's anything you can do. They think it's either there or it's not. So thank you for sharing and helping people see that you can work it, you can make something, a relationship awesome. So it's been great to talk to you.
Well, thank you, Rob. It's been a pleasure to be here with you and hear what you've learned and seen and your insights as well. So I appreciate it. Okay,
thank you. I know that you're not in the relationship field, but for listeners that are interested, and maybe there is something that someone might connect with, you do speaker training, is it?
I do real estate and kind of what we call, quote, advanced real estate education. And so I talk about a lot of things because real estate, the industry is quite broad. But if they want to follow me or connect with me, they could go to my website, which is Funtentional Living. It's the same as MonicaNeubauer.com, but I've had this new brand and it's called Funtentional. And I put that word together because I want to live my life with fun and intentionality. So funtentionalliving.com and MonicaNeubauer.com. And, or since your listeners are European, it's actually the German pronunciation, Monica Neubauer.
So I wondered if there was some German in there when I saw it.
Yep. So my husband's family is German. My mom was Swedish. So that's kind of our European backgrounds there. So I'd love to have anybody, if they need to connect with me, that'd be great.
Okay. Well, thank you and good luck. And I hope you have reached the happy ever after or otherwise learn from your next stages.
Yes. Either when you get there, enjoy it. And when the mountains come again, climb up over them, get to the next plateau. That's the best place to be for me.
Okay. Thank you, Monica.
Thank you, Rob.
Thanks for listening. I'm Rob McPhillips, and I'm here to help you navigate your relationships more successfully. Go to relationshipgpsproject.com to find answers to your relationship questions or ask new ones.